I'm Peter Parsons, the Lewisboro Town Supervisor, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about 2015 and about what I'm thinking about for 2016. 2015 was a pretty darn good year for this town. First of all, seeing as the finances are my primary responsibility, I should tell you that we were upgraded by Standard & Poor's and the New York State Comptroller. So, in fact, we owe a big round of applause to our town comptroller, Leo Masterson. So if you see him, thank him. Second, possibly the single most important thing we've got to do other than finances is to keep people safe. We do that in two ways. The first, the most obvious way, is via our police force. And it was a big year. We've now got our full-time and part-time police officers working together. In addition, we have got a new contract which makes people relax a little. We not only actually have a new contract for the police department through 2020, but we also have contracts through 2020 for the highway department and everybody else who works for the town. And I'm pleased about that because, quite honestly, when people know there is a contract in place, they tend to concentrate on how we can do better for the town, secure in the knowledge that things will in general make sense for them. In terms of the police in particular, as you may know, we have rented or leased the old police station in South Salem to the state police. While that doesn't mean that they spend any more time patrolling this town, it does mean that we've got a lot of state troopers driving through the town to get to their various patrol areas. This is good because a lot of policing is being seen, and the state troopers are way more visible in town because of that place in South Salem. The second part of keeping people safe in this town is making sure our roads are first of all, in reasonable condition, and secondly, of course, that they're clear of ice and snow. I think everybody would agree who drives around this area that our highway department did an excellent job through the brutal winter of 2015, and that this year, so far, they've done a pretty darn good job. In addition, when it comes to paving, they have paved, in 2015, they paved Briscoe, Conant Valley, Cornwall Court, Increase Miller, the Lake Katona area, Laurel, Mark Mead, Trybrook, Timberland, and Glen Drive. That is quite a lot of work and is a big step forward for the town. In addition to that, you may have noticed sort of squiggly black lines on roads. That is a very cheap way of prolonging the life of a road. And we've been doing a reasonable job of getting in and doing that to roads before they really deteriorate. Possibly even more important in the road area is some successful lobbying. You will remember we got Route 138 paved in 2014, and the state has pledged to repave Route 123 this spring. Those are big step forwards because they're heavily traveled roads, and it's important to the whole community that they're in good shape. I think some of the biggest achievements of 2015 had nothing to do with the taxpayers' dollars, although it had everything to do with the money that individuals in the town gave to these projects. The first one was obviously the opening of the new Lewisboro Library. That was done entirely with donations. It is a magnificent achievement. It is a modern library to serve people as they now live. And if you haven't been there, I would really urge you to visit. You will find there are a whole lot of activities there besides what you might expect in a library. And I think it's a huge advance for the town. At the same time, at Leon Levy Preserve, we now have a native plant garden of some significant size at the side of the parking lot, in between 123 and the parking lot. And first of all, it is a way for people to get an idea of what native plants look like. Secondly, they've on the whole been selected, we will see how successfully, to avoid the deprivations of deer. And we could all learn a little from there, apart from it looking really good. I guess the great other news is that the parking lot there is a high-use parking lot. It is amazing how many people are now taking advantage of that preserve by walking and hiking there. In addition, we've had volunteers working at Onatru, Oldfield, and at Leon Levy on rebuilding and expanding the trails. At Oldfield, we've used state money to return it to the state it's supposed to be in as much as possible, which is that of meadow, so that birds can breed there. So now we've got a better breeding ground for those kind of animals. We've got, which is good, and the birds can thrive and multiply there. We used restricted funds which were lying idle to install a composting toilet at the town park and to rehab the basketball court at the town park. I'd now like to pass on to something that's a little bit more complicated. I'm sure you've heard that very often the town has to operate under state mandates. These are laws that the state passes and we have to obey. Possibly the most important immediately is a law about septic systems. Everybody with a septic has to have it pumped or inspected before May 1st. There is a 5-year period going back 5 years from May 1st, which qualifies you as far as this law is concerned. If you haven't had it pumped or inspected for 5 years, then I would strongly suggest that you get it done before May 1st. One of the reasons for this is the state mandates significant fines if you're non-compliant. Those fines are $200 in the first instance and increasing by $200 every 2 weeks after that. You can do the math. It doesn't take long before those fines are real and the money is quite serious. I'd suggest you do it, and when you get it done, because governments have been known to make a mess of paperwork, keep the receipt from the septic hauler. That's your evidence that you did it. So if we or the county or somebody comes to you later on and says you never pumped your septic, you can pull out that with that receipt and say, nonsense, I did. Here's who pumped it and here's when they pumped it. I'd strongly suggest that. There is another mandate which is very much in people's minds at the moment. It's the affordable housing mandate. I don't mind at the moment very much whether you were in favor of the way we handled it or against the way we handled it. But I want everybody to know that if you qualify from an income point of view for affordable housing, these houses are available to you. There is a weird myth around town that you can only qualify for this housing if you don't come from the town. That's nonsense. Anybody, you can come from New Orleans, let alone Lewisboro, and qualify for this housing. In fact, if you look north of us at the 60 units of affordable housing that have been put in North Salem, you will find that about 25% are filled with people who lived in town previously, and another 25% are filled with people who had some form of relationship with the town. By that I mean somebody whose kids live in the town, who was living down in Florida, but they were now getting lonely in Florida and they wanted to move closer to their kids, and they qualified for this housing and they've moved up there and rented there. I really would urge you that if you see this, don't only think about yourself, but think about people you know, the children of people you know who might really benefit from this. It's important to the town because we depend a lot on our younger people to man our volunteer fire departments. And the main problem for them is they often don't have enough money to live in this town. We need to keep our volunteer fire departments, otherwise our taxes will be astronomical. And in order to keep them, we've got to keep our youth, and we've got to provide somewhere for them to live. Please, please have them apply. There are other mandates. One I spend a lot of time on is to do with phosphorus. This town has got a mandate to reduce phosphorus by about 100 pounds a year in the storm water. We will have been successful in the first 5 years of this program, and we're now embarking in the second 5 years. This is important because unless we do it properly, we will no longer qualify for grants to do this work. And if we ever have to do it ourselves, it will be enormously expensive. All right, 2016. There are various things that we need to start thinking about. You may have heard talk of a business and tourism committee. Our tax base is at the best stagnant in this town, and in fact is slightly declining. That almost forces taxes up because although people would love to believe there are lots of things in town government that can be cut, like me, in practice, there isn't much left to cut. A lot of services are required. Remember, half our budget goes in roads, so let's just take half our budget off the table, because I think you want to be able to get to work in the morning, and I don't think one of the big costs of not repaving roads is one that you pay when you end up having to get new tires, when your rim gets beaten up, when your shock absorbers get destroyed, when you lose a muffler. All of that is a form of tax on you because the town is not keeping its roads in good condition. So there's not much way to cut back on that 50%. Another 15% goes into the police. Another chunk goes into park and rec. But if I get anything from people when I go door to door in this town, It's that the one thing that people really want to keep and embellish is our Parks and Rec program. Quite honestly, because you don't call the police, maybe in a couple of years, they don't seem that important. They are pretty darn important when you really need them, though. So we do need our police, and Parks and Rec is something we use regularly and we all enjoy. So there isn't much more room to cut. So the town board is going to be looking very hard at ways to increase town revenues. And as a first start in that, we're in the process of setting up a business and tourism committee to try to increase the amount of commerce in town, not just because that might increase our taxes a little, which it would, but that would be a small amount. But we also know from looking at other villages and towns and hamlets outside of Lewisboro that one of the main things that young people are looking for when they're looking for a home is somewhere where there are businesses, there are restaurants, there is a bar to go and have a drink in the evening. And so I believe that by increasing business and tourism type facilities in town, we will do something to increase people's wish to live here. And if we can increase their wish to live here, we can increase the price that you get for your homes when you sell them. And that's good. All right, what else? A couple of small things, but good things that have happened so far in 2016. If you were around on January 1st when we had pretty darn good weather, the cooperating agencies had a great series of first day celebrations. Thanks to Dana Maitland and her Park and Rec group, that worked extremely well, and there were way more people who came this year than came last. And last year was pretty darn good for a first year. Second, in Golden's Bridge, we have had the problem for a couple of years of a decaying community center. Quite honestly, the town doesn't really have the money to renovate a building it's not using. So we have rented it out to the Katona Art Center. I think they will be a magnificent addition to the town, and they also have provided the wherewithal for us to renovate that entire building. So one of the more historic buildings in town will now, will now be a building which we can be proud of again. And a big welcome to the Katona Art Center. There are massive classes there, whether it's in pottery, sculpture, art, or whatever. There are classes for adults, there are classes for young kids, there are classes for everybody. Why don't you take a look into it? That's it. Have a great 2016. Enjoy yourselves. Don't think too much about town government, but know that we're working pretty hard for you. Thank you.
You're watching Lewisboro Community Television, Channel 20.